think
That's
that's
very
totally fair.
like it begins.
I was gonna say, I think that's totally fair. I just think in that case, it should have been much shorter
It was
as
pretty
a
short. It
beginning.
wasn't that long book.
Maybe not sure. I don't know. There's a
It,
few
it
parts you could
wasn't
trim.
short enough to be a prologue either, though. Like it's not a long book, but
Hmm.
it's I don't think it's like a prologue short.
Yeah.
Just a heads up, we're live. It might ask for permission to record.
Like I do think there's a lot of things in it that are like I forget exactly how it's worded, but when it says basically when it says that he feels like he loves the kid, the boy, and then it also mentioned that he loved Allie. I was like, well, like that wasn't like these relationships aren't really developed at all. Though. You're just saying now that he like feels love for these characters.
Yeah.
Like like there's not really and that's my it felt kind of almost like it's a first draft or something where it's like you're establishing that you want these characters to have these relationships, but you're not actually giving these characters these relationships.
Yeah. It does feel like he's telling you all the time that the gunslinger loves the boy and loves Allie. Is that her name?
I think that was her name, but
Um,
it could be wrong.
yeah, I think it was Alice, and he called her Allie, I think.
Yeah, it tells.
Yeah, and it's like because he keeps telling you this, like I'm not entirely convinced. Like it's like you're trying to sell me on the fact that he loves these people, but I yet I yet to be convinced about that. All right. We're still waiting on Chance, but we can go ahead and get started. Welcome, Alice, to the 34th book club, monthly book club we do here on Rabbit Hole. We got some familiar faces. We got a new guest joining us this evening as well. Mr. Joel Murray of Morbid Orchid fame is here. Thanks for
Thank-
coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's exciting.
Yeah, I remember a while back you telling me that you were a big Stephen King fan. So when we were doing this, I was like, I gotta let Joel know.
And man, it sounds like from some of the pre-recording chatter that I'm going to be the lone defender of this book in the crowd.
You
Uh,
know,
No,
I'm
I dug it, and
centrist.
yeah, I liked it a lot. And I mean, I agree that it felt like it didn't feel like a whole complete thing in and of itself. But I've read enough, long series in my life that I'm kind of here for, I'm kind of here for it. I may get, through the end of book 8 and just, you know, slam the last one down and, anger and frustration, but I doubt it.
yeah, I have mixed feelings about it. But
so
we'll get into that.
has, has,
Um,
has anybody else finished the whole series?
no, but my buddy Chance, he's on his way. He's the one who recommended it. He's a huge fan of this series. So you won't be the lone defender.
Great to hear.
Uh, we also have the infamous Liz and Hiatt Collins of Cassette Stress joining us. Thank you for joining us once again.
Thanks for having us.
I have the one and only David Pena here as well. Another book club OG regular.
Mhm.
We also got Lazy Phalanges, my sweet boy.
Looks like his little knee.
Yeah. The way the cursor, my cursor is on the screen, it's like Lazy's got a little hand. And might I say, you're looking dapper as ever. I like your eyebrows.
Thank you, thank you.
So we're gathered here today to discuss the first in the Dark Tower series, The Gunslinger by Stephen King. Um, okay, so who didn't read this for the first time? I guess just as of right now, just Joel, right? This was not the first time that you read this. Okay. So
My fourth time reading it. I've read the revised and expanded twice, the original version once, and then I actually, this fourth time reading it, I audiobooked it on like a 9 hour drive from where we live in Nashville up to Cleveland. And it was actually really fun to just like listen to it all in one sitting because it like I was on a journey, Roland was on a journey.
Mm.
It's just kind of a fun mirror.
That's nice.
What the audio version? Which one was it? The extended version or the original?
Yeah, it was the revised and expanded.
So I read the last half of this book last night, like starting at midnight, ending at like 3 in the morning. So like the last 120 pages I crammed from the point that they encounter the succubus to the end of the book. I read in one go. And yeah, it's an adventure. I didn't have like a hard time like with like long sprints like that because there's not really like even when it does like backstory stuff, it's still gripping enough where I'm like, it's a page turner. There are several books we've done that I enjoyed, but they were like hard to get through. I think this book is good at being like kind of flowing.
Yeah, that's one thing that I love about King's writing is that it's just like so readable. It feels like he can just like crack open my skull and just like pour in images and like it's never work. It's cool.
Yeah, that's a good point. He does a good job with visualization, with making you see stuff.
He writes like really cinematically. Yeah, I think it makes sense why his work is so adapted.
Hmm. Yeah, speaking of adaptations, we watched the Dark Tower movie. Me and
Uh,
David did the other night.
I'm sorry.
Is
Oh,
it
man.
is it a recent movie or is it in like 80s?
It's semi-recent.
Okay.
Yeah,
Like last 10 years, say.
Okay.
Last 5 years.
Okay.
Is it that recent?
I don't know.
2017. So
That's semi-recent, yeah.
yeah, it's bad. So they try to cover the entire series in one movie, kind of. Uh,
Yeah.
it really doesn't work. It's a bummer.
It was fucking abysmal.
It's already bad when you try to cram one book into a movie, but that much.
Yeah. I will say I did have a lot of fun watching it. Like it was entertaining for sure.
Because it's like the good kind of bad. So like
Yeah.
if you did want to watch it, it's worth it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not gonna get a good movie out of it, but it's fun.
I had a good time. Was it a good movie? No.
It's an expensive mess, which can be fun to
Yeah.
experience.
We kept making jokes that they're just following McConaughey around. This is just what he's doing in his day-to-day life.
He's not acting.
Yeah. Sacrificing kids is kind of like just his Tuesday.
Because he played he played the Man in Black.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, that was something.
Oh.
When we were watching the movie, David pointed something out about the book that I didn't really think about. But typically, if you're telling a fantasy story like this,
Especially like something like this, like a series that's like
Yeah.
a big expanding thing.
yeah, it's usually from the perspective of like either like a child or like someone new to that uh scenario. That
Mhm.
way they have like all this reason to give you exposition.
And explain everything.
And Gunslinger very ambitiously is just like, no, we're not explaining anything.
Here's an established, hardened character that already lives here, and he's just doing his own thing.
Yeah.
In fact, the only time he's ever confused is when he's being told about stuff from our world.
Yeah. Yeah. Instead of it being like, oh, this character doesn't know things, you're like more surprised when he doesn't know things. You like kind of expect him to know everything.
Yeah. One thing I really hate about the movie is just like how like they just introduce Roland with like no fanfare. Like he's just suddenly on the screen. And if you're like me and you've like waited for like years to to see the character adapted and suddenly he's just on there doing shit and like it doesn't seem like the filmmakers really care about him. I was just like from the first frame I was like, "Oh no."
Yeah.
He's not even the main character of the movie.
Yeah.
It's the kid.
It's more Jake than
Yeah.
anything.
Okay.
Which I guess makes sense to make it more broadly appealing to.
because they're doing the thing I was talking to him about. They're going with that route where you start with the newbie
Mhm.
because to them they think it's more easier to like pull someone in that way.
Sure. I mean, it's like a tried and tested way to like introduce a world.
You just use a
Yeah. Whereas, like, I mean, if you're not trying to make Stephen King's work, what are you doing, right? Like, what makes Gunslinger, what works about Gunslinger is the way Stephen King does it. If you're trying to do something else with this universe, it's like, I guess it's interesting enough, but like, you really just want to see it the way it's done originally. Um,
Know
another,
that
go ahead.
before they made that movie, there was an Amazon pilot that was produced that was like starting with book four, which is my favorite book of the series and one of my favorite books in general. It's Wizard and Glass, and it's like Roland's kind of origin story. It's like goes back to if you read the revised and expanded version, it's like the story of Susan and Magus, like the
Mm.
city where they kind of uh, uh, cut their teeth and become real gunslingers. It's just like a beautiful, tragic romance story. Um, and I guess that there's like, yeah, the original plan was to like start there in like a big budget Amazon series, but they never made it beyond a pilot. I would have loved to have seen that. It would have been really cool.
Hmm. That'd be cool. Knowing Amazon adaptations, it may not have been good.
That's true. That's true. Maybe dodged a bullet
The
there, actually.
blessing in disguise.
I mean, do you think this series would have been easier to like get into if they started with that? If it starts with book four?
Like kind of a chronological storytelling.
Well, yeah, you start from like, and you would have to explain more that way, like the
Mm,
actual world stuff. Because once again, it would be him, actually as the newbie or whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, I listened to this podcast called The King Cast, and one of their co-hosts had made the argument a bunch of times that the second book in the series is actually a better book to start with if you want to like draw somebody in to the Dark Tower and like convince them that the whole series is worth reading. Um, I don't know if I agree. I agree. I agree if maybe if you read the Gunslinger like the original version, not the revised and expanded, it's just like a little bit less charming in that mode. There's like not all of the like jargon of the world. It just doesn't suck you into the world, I think, as much
It's
as
quicker.
an expanded. Um, I think that the first one does an okay job of like if you want to know more about. I just love being in Midworld. I think it's like the
Mm.
place to hang out in. Um, and I did see on Twitter this year that the King has mentioned going back there and doing like another story set there, which I'm very excited about. Um, I think that we should mention that the Dark Tower series is the like not only is the Dark Tower the center of like reality in the book, it's like the center of King's whole creative universe. Like all of his books, well, most of his books make allusions to the Dark Tower. There are multiple characters from other books that appear in the Dark Tower. Um, so like as a King fan, like any little allusion to the Dark Tower and other stuff is like is so titillating and
Mm.
exciting. Um,
That's cool. You get like the kind of like the like the almost like MCU kind of like fan service kind of thing.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
I did notice in the movie there was like he walks by this carnival and it's like says Pennywise on it.
yeah, yeah. Like
There's sorry, go
in
ahead.
in Doctor Sleep. I don't know if you saw
Yes,
that.
I've read Doctor Sleep. Actually, Shining, Doctor Sleep, and now The Gunslinger are the only Stephen King I've read.
Nice. Um, yeah, there in the movie Doctor Sleep, there's like a moment when one of the characters like says a line from the Dark Tower, and I like cried in the movie theater. I was so happy. It was very pathetic, but it just like
What was the line?
I think he said all things serve the beam. Um, which is something that you wouldn't really get if from just reading the first book. I mean, I think beams are mentioned, that like the world is kind of architected with these beams that like cross reality, and there's like a turtle at one end, and the tower is in the middle. Um, and Roland's like following the beam, chasing Walter, Martin, Randall Flagg, whoever he is.
My favorite parts of the Gunslinger is King's prose, like the way he writes things. I think is the strongest part of this book. Is just the way he words things is really nice sometimes. Like I remember there was one part when he is in bed with Allie and he says something like, I should have highlighted it. I might have actually. He says something like, without any lights on, there was nothing to hide what they were doing. It's kind of like, or without any lights on, they were like, what they were doing was in full view. And I thought that was a neat way of saying that. But yeah, the way he says things, I think I really like the way he gives names to concepts like the touch and the shine and the dark tower. These are like he's really nicely put a ribbon on like this entire thing that he's trying to explain and can just really quickly say it without having to explain it every time.
Like poetry. Yeah.
Yeah. He's really good at that. He's really good at giving names to things. Like when he explains the Dark Tower, the way both in The Shining, in Doctor Sleep, and in The Gunslinger, the way he explains shine, I think it's just a really cool concept. It's a cool way of explaining something that, and I think that's another one of his strengths is the things he's explaining have roots in reality. Like it's magic that's believable enough, right? It's not too big of a stretch for it to be outside of like perceptive realism.
Speaking of the Shine and its connection to the Dark Tower, I just want to give a little crumb to anyone who has read the series and is listening. Uh, One thing I caught on this read, my fourth read, there's a moment when Roland is talking to I think his name's Brown. He's like the
Yeah.
desert dweller who has the raven or the crow. Uh, and there's like a moment when Roland like thinks about killing him, and it seems like the guy kind of reads his mind that he's gonna do that, and he's like, "I'd prefer you not to kill me." And there's like a few more moments where the dude just like kind of seems to be reading Roland's mind. Um, and there are also there's like an allusion in that section to Al Ghul Siento, which is like this camp that shows up in like the end of the series where basically like the evil powers in the series are trying to take people who have psychic powers like the Shine and use them to destroy the tower. So they're like taking their psychic ability and channeling it towards evil. And I think that what I caught this read through is that this brown guy probably escaped from El Gulciento and is like living in the desert by himself. He's gifted with the shine, and that's why he can like read Roland's thoughts, which is just something cool that I hadn't noticed before.
Oh, cool. I remember that part. He stepped outside to pee, and when he comes back, he's like, "I prefer you didn't kill me." And that because he was already wondering if this was like a shade from the Man in Black or if this was a real person. And instead of like reassuring him that like he's like, okay, now I really don't know. Now I'm like pretty sure I should kill you. Yeah, that part was really cool. I like that whole interaction with Brown.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, without knowing any more about the series, my feelings on it just from this book is that it's like some kind of afterlife. I don't really feel like that's a stretch considering we saw Jake die. Like we saw his death. So this is like the next world after that. It'd be kind of like something like that would be my guess. Yeah. Again, I don't know any more about it, but
And this is the only one I've read. I got that impression too.
yeah.
Or that maybe this is one, one of, multiple universes that you can, end up in, being born or dying. Maybe you can die in one and appear in a different one.
There are other worlds than these. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the worst universe of all, one where Hey Jude is the only song they have.
Yeah. Something Lazy pointed out, and then once he said it, I couldn't stop saying it, is Stephen King talks about genitals a lot. Even in it, like I would say, especially in a non-sexual context.
Yeah, about like what the events are like acting upon Roland's scrotum. Like comes up.
Yeah.
Scrote check. He's like, in case you were wondering.
My nuts are inside my body now.
Yeah, there's a lot of Stephen King talking about Nolan's genitals. That's a thing.
Is that true in his other writings as well? Is this just sort of a general enthusiasm?
It's definitely a King trope. Is the scrotum drawing up in fear.
Staple.
One thing that I do really love about this book and the series in general is just that it's just like a mashup of like every genre, like Western, obviously, with a Gunslinger, it's fantasy, it's like it's horror, but what I noticed this read through is like it's like cosmic horror, especially like
Yeah, like Lovecraft a little bit.
like with who's the guy who the Man in Black brings back to life, and like his keyword is 19. Like that's so like Lovecraft, where it's like we don't know what he tells Ellie that like ruins her and makes Roland her like beg Roland to shoot her, but like whatever it was like a knowledge too great, or like even
I
slow mutant part is like kind of a little bit like cosmic.
Yeah.
Were you
I
gonna
was
say?
gonna say I really like that part also because I was gonna say I really like that part with the whole 19 thing also because it focuses the horror of it on something that is very understandable, which
Yeah,
is just
on Monday.
having this word that you know you're gonna say.
Yeah, I should say that I do have a 19 tattoo.
Oh, cool.
I've got
Kinda.
the Gunslinger's
Uh,
symbol on my hand. This shit changed my life. Good to see you guys. Sorry.
Hey, Chance, this is Joel. I don't know if y'all met, but he's a big Stephen King fan.
I don't think we have.
So you two are the only ones who have like actually read like the whole series.
Right.
Everybody else is a newbie.
Oh, right on. Yeah,
Didn't-
it's excellent. Did any of you guys happen to get the illustrated versions?
No,
Would
I don't
have
even
all
know.
the-
Y'all are talking about the expanded version. I don't even know which version I have.
You probably have the revised because most of the editions that were released after like 2003, I think,
Okay.
were the revised editions. So it's going to be that one.
Because I think you mentioned the background or like the flashback stuff is like new stuff, right?
No, it was in the original version. There was like slight changes that he made, like with a couple of the names and stuff like that. But most of it in most of the revised stuff was really like minor things. The thing about the resumption caption at the very beginning, that was new. That ties into the rest of the books that came afterwards. But yeah, it's amazing and it gets insanely deep.
Yeah, it's cool. We've already been talking for a minute. Do you have any like initial thoughts you had?
For me, like let me get my brain settled for a second. So
Okay, you're good.
what happened for me was growing up in the Bible Belt, like Stephen King and Dungeons and Dragons were like taboo, man. Like I wasn't allowed to be exposed to any of that stuff all throughout the 80s and into even into high school. So when I was 19, it's really weird, dude. This whole series like resonated with my life in such a strange way.
It shined.
Yeah, it absolutely did. So I had seen the TV movie of The Stand, which, you know, Randall Flagg is like the big villain of that whole thing, right? And so I was familiar with that character, but other than that, nothing. I'm standing in the bookstore, 19 years old, and there's this random dude standing next to me, and I'm in the horror fantasy section, which is where they had all the Stephen King stuff. And I'm trying to find a new author, basically. Like I had just read Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. So I was like, man, I really love that book. And I'm standing there and the G's and the K's were sort of close to each other. This random guy standing next to me. I had found a copy of this book called Eyes of the Dragon at a used book sale. And I had read this, which is like, it's pretty short. It's just like just a little self-contained kind of fantasy story. But Flagg is one of the main characters in this. And so I'm standing there and this guy goes, "What are you looking for, man?" I was like, "Oh, I don't know. I'm just looking for something new to read." And without missing a beat, this random person, he picked up a copy of the Gunslinger and he handed it to me and he goes, "You need to read The Dark Tower. This will change your life." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." So I bought the first two. I bought that and I bought the drawing of the three. And I mean, it was by the time I got to the end of the Gunslinger and that whole section about the tower, and he talks about like how size encompasses everything, and you know, he's turning the tarot cards and he gives him the vision and let there be light and all that stuff. It's, of course, by the end of that, I was totally hooked. And then you get into the drawing of the three, and it goes majorly epic at that point. So it really like changed my whole mental perspective as a 19-year-old. And then the 19 thing, that was the other thing that he changed. That wasn't in the original version. 19. Okay. The thing about the word, that was something that
okay, so I definitely got the revised version.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But no, it did it. And so when I started the series, only the fourth book had come out. Like it had come out like I guess a couple years before I started reading it, because I started reading it in at the very end of 1999, which is really weird. All the numbers added up. There was such strange
19.
Yeah, seriously, there was such weird synchronicity with the whole thing for me. And then
wait, you were 19 when you started reading The Dark Tower?
Oh. Yeah, seriously. Like,
you're a trap.
So weird.
You're a trap.
Dude. It was so weird.
You were left as a trap. I'm not falling for it.
For all of you guys, yeah. So who has read it? Who was it that had said it?
Joel.
Oh, hi, Joel. I'm Chance, by the way. Nice to meet you. And then, so I read the first four books, and Wizard and Glass ended. And then, you know, of course, everyone's waiting for the series to end. And then he gets hit by a van and almost dies. And then everyone thought he was going to die. And it was really crazy. And then after that, he wrote the last three books, I guess. He finished them all in a space of a couple of years there at the end, while he was in the hospital, and then immediately afterwards. And so then the last three came out like incrementally over the next couple of years. But it changed my life. So after I read the first four, then I went back and read The Stand, and you start to realize how it all tied together. And there were these characters that showed up in different places. And it's amazing, man. Like the way that he describes Roland as the kind of man that would straighten crooked pictures in strange hotel rooms, and just like it's brilliant. It's so brilliant. And I mean,
that's my favorite line of the book. It's so good.
Yeah.
With y'all being big King fans, what is like the reading order for The Dark Tower?
I brought
is
all
there
the
like
books.
Okay, is there like extended reading you need to do as you go along the Dark Tower series?
Not necessarily, although The Stand and Salem's Lot are really important. After the fourth book, after Wizard and Glass, I do recommend you read The Stand and you read Salem's Lot specifically.
The Stand's the one that's like 1,100 pages, right?
Yeah, it's his biggest one. Yeah.
Okay.
And
that's going to be an audiobook for me.
That's not necessarily like super important for the story of the tower itself, but it gives you a lot of context.
Okay.
But Salem's Lot's really important as far as certain characters go. I'm trying not to give spoilers and stuff.
Because you're pulling out these like
Yeah,
Well,
these
this
tomes,
is the whole
these tomes
series
that you have.
So,
Oh shit!
yeah, this is all 7 books, and then
Can you show Alice?
yeah,
Just hold it to the
I will
camera.
absolutely as soon as I get them out and in
Hold
order.
this one in comparison.
So let's see, where's Wizard and Glass?
Dang,
Yeah,
that's a lot.
yeah, it's
Seeing
pretty nuts.
it like visually is wow.
Yeah, and I guess I forgot Wizard and Glass. So there's actually the 4th book goes right in here.
Oh, so they vary in size quite a bit too.
Yeah, yeah.
'cause
This is
these
number
last two have
number
been-
6 is a little bit shorter, and then so but this is Alice. Here is the complete series minus Wizard and Glass, which would go right in here and add quite a bit to it.
Are you still down to read the series?
That. Oh yeah.
It's worth it. It's absolutely worth it.
We'll do one of these in every December for the next 8 years. I think is the way to do it.
I think
I've
that
read a lot of long series, and yeah,
you should read the core series in order of publication. I think like some people say that you should slot the 8th book went through the keyhole.
Yeah.
And Roland technically tells the story, but I think
Yeah.
you can probably just save it for the end.
Yeah, this one you can read this after you've read the whole series, and it won't screw anything up because it's kind of a self-contained tale in and of itself. But this is really good too. The Wind Through the Keyhole is amazing.
One thing that's fun that you do get a taste of a bit in the Gunslinger is that King loves to like put stories inside stories, like kind of like a nesting doll storytelling thing.
Mhm.
There's like a part where Roland is telling Brown what happened, and then in that telling,
Oh,
Allie starts telling a story. So it's like levels deep of storytelling, and it kind of makes like some of the whole series, like whole 4th book is just Roland telling them his quartet, the story of his childhood.
right.
So you can kind of insert those. It's not like super important that you read things chronologically.
Except for, I mean, the 7 books themselves, like obviously have to be read in order. But yeah, I do love that how it's like it starts out with him in the desert, and then it flashes back to him meeting the Dweller, and he tells him the story about the bird, where the guy with the crazy hair and the bird, and then he asks him, he's like, "Are you an enchantment?" And the guy's like, "I don't know, I don't think so,
Brown,
but yeah, but maybe I am." And then it goes from there back to Tull, and it like
It does a lot of jumping back and forth.
yeah, and it continues to do that.
I was telling them before you got here, I read like the last 120 pages last night.
Awesome.
And like in one, from the point that they meet the succubus, to the end of the book.
Yeah.
I did in one go. And
sorry, I don't know if Alice can see that.
not when you just show it to me.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. I don't know if Alice can see any of this stuff. That's Roland in the glade, where he took the mescaline. He's waiting on the spirit.
So you mentioned The Witcher, and that part for sure was given huge Witcher vibes. Yeah, absolutely. Like
I was curious, has anyone taken LSD, and is that what mescaline is? Does that like seem what it?
So mescaline is a different thing. That's what peyote cactus is.
Right.
So it is a psychedelic. I personally have not done mescaline, but I've done a bunch of other psychedelics.
Isn't it supposed to be a little hardcore?
I took mescaline at Bonnaroo the first year they had it here. It's the only time I ever took it, and
it's a wild one from what I hear.
yeah, it's a prolonged thing. Like
Yeah.
it went for like 12 hours and was really intense.
I will say, without getting like too much into anecdotal story stuff, if you're gonna do like channeling and contacting spirits, getting in that headspace is very much like a witch doctor, shaman kind of, like you're going in to do some work. This is not recreational. You're going to combat a spirit, and you have to be on that level in order to interact with it. And that is why, at least this is where I think King was going with it. Jake is more susceptible to the Jake is more susceptible to this because he's a child. And like, I know that's where King's going with it, because children have more of the shine, is basically. And if you're on psychedelics, your eyes are more open, you're more malleable. You have, as an adult, we develop these ideas of how reality works. It's like, oh, I know how physics work. So nothing's going to break the laws I know to be. But if you're a child, you don't know any of the rules. So you're more likely to see something that doesn't make sense if you don't know what the rules are. That's why kids have imaginary friends, which is kind of a weird phenomena that we don't really think about a lot in society. But yeah, like kids hallucinate frequently. It's like a common thing.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens when you're at psychedelics. It makes you more like child mind.
Yeah. Makes you more open to the.
Yeah. And that's one of my favorite things about King, is the way he gives a name to the shine, the way he gives a name to the touch. And the Dark Tower itself is
yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah, the way he explains these concepts is really helpful. It also, okay, so let's tinfoil hat for a minute here.
Okay.
King has this prevalent focus in a lot of his works about the vampiric thing going on with the spirit of children. Okay.
And how they're preyed upon by
forces. By the powers that be. Like that's a reoccurring theme in King's books, is like the soul of a child and its like pureness, and how that energy can be harnessed.
Yeah, you're literally using the shine right now to read into the later parts of the story, and you don't even know it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, like, that's what I'm saying, is King is onto something. Like, he knows some shit.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not saying he's involved in like world level like cabal.
I feel like he's rich and powerful enough to at least know something.
He knows some stuff though.
But I don't think and I agree with you guys, he definitely didn't know, he wasn't involved in, or he wasn't rich and powerful when he wrote this, though. That's what's crazy, is that
interesting.
He had tapped into this when he was a poor, writer driving around on a motorcycle with his typewriter.
That's right. You told me this is one of his early works.
This is the first book he ever wrote. It's not the first that was published, but it's the first story that he ever wrote.
That is interesting.
Yeah. That was one of the things I really liked about the description or the foreword that he wrote, was where he was talking about that he was, such a Lord of the Rings fan and wanted to write something of that scope, but knew he had to kind of let it become something else, or he'd just write one of the many, copies that existed in the 70s and 80s. I'm not sure what point I was going, but anyway, just him talking about that. This was kind of where things really started for him, was taking that inspiration and then sitting on it for a while until he had a new idea. That this was something that he really, the first path that he took with it.
It is funny that, like, I don't know if Chase, you've read the like epic poem that it's based on.
Final Roll Under the Dark Tower. Yeah, I have a copy of it at the house.
Yeah, it's like, it's weird that, like, it seems like to like base it almost seems like a writing exercise, right? Let's see if I can adapt this poem in my own way and create this world.
Totally.
It's like became so much more to him.
Yeah. It is interesting too for this to be such an ambitious first book he wrote. I guess it makes sense. Obviously, this wouldn't be like the first draft by any means, so it makes sense that like it wasn't the first book he released, but it is like hugely ambitious. We touched on earlier a point that David made, which is like usually in a fantasy setting, it's through the eyes of a child or someone like new to the situation.
Yeah.
Especially in a series.
Yeah.
Because that gives you an excuse to have all this exposition, but he makes this really ambitious move to just have Roland, who's this well-established character in this universe, and he's not explaining shit to you.
Right.
The other thing he does that's also like a big no in this kind of storytelling is he broadcasts ahead of time what's about to happen. He did this, I noted several times he did this, where he tells you exactly what's about to happen, because there's all this prophecy, and that's
That's a kingism for sure.
Okay.
That that was the last time he saw her alive thing, is like he loves doing that because it makes you compelled to just keep blasting through the chapters, man. Like you gotta know.
And in my opinion, it doesn't really detract from when the hit happens. Like he tells you for a long time that the kid's gonna get sacrificed. And then it happens, and
that dread builds.
Yeah,
because you know it's coming, but you don't know when, you don't know how. And then the thing about Roland not even trying to save him, and the fact that Jake understood like instinctively, where he says, "Go then, there are other worlds than these." Like he's already died in one world and ended up in another one, and again, like you said, as a child, like his mind is way more open to whatever that experience is, and that becomes hugely important. The idea of Roland's character stepping over the corpses of all of these people in his, like, the Man in Black even says to him, he's like, "You're such an anomaly. You're so single-minded and so focused, and you don't care who you kill or who gets killed on the way, because all you care about is getting to the tower." And there's a lot of stuff later on about basically him being a tower junkie, and it's just like, oh man, it gets so good, dude. It gets so good.
Like his poor Hawk.
Oh, David, yeah, absolutely. And he knew, like, he even tells David, like, "I think you're gonna die today."
Yeah. He tells you everything before it happens. All the major events are foretold, and that's also like a huge no. And like, it's like Stephen King at this point, I can tell, like, even if like he's a novice writer at this point, he understands the rules well enough to
Alex,
like.
what do you mean by being a huge? Because like foreshadowing in writing is a pretty common thing.
Well, foreshadowing, but like Joel pointed out,
counteracted it?
like straight, not alluding to it, is straight up telling you, like that was the last time he saw her. Is like, is that foreshadowing, or is that just giving you the punchline?
Yeah, that's a good point, because it's not, there's no ambiguity about it at all. Like, oh, maybe she lived, it's like, no, she's gonna die. Like, it's just, when is this gonna happen?
I suppose it would be more foreshadowing-esque if it was an not a trustworthy narrator. Like if the narrator was not entirely honest, then it would be like some vagueness to it. But like, you're never lied to. So like, the more it happens, the more you expect it to actually happen.
Right. Man, it's so hard to have this conversation about this and not give anything away.
Well, having not read anymore, just this first one, I can see that, like, what I'm talking about, where it's like there's this prelude and then there's the give. I'm sure there are elements like way later in the series that have already sort of been hinted at and foretold in this book. Like, so I imagine by the time I get to the end, I'll be like, okay, a lot of that was mentioned in Gunslinger.
Yes.
I mean, like, straight up with the tarot cards, like when he's given his fortune, like that's pretty, like, he's telling you how the series is going to go. Which is
you don't even have to wait that long to get those mysteries revealed either. I mean, that's basically just the next book.
As soon as the drawing of the three starts, he's introducing you to the characters that you're about to meet in the next book. Basically, the Lady of the Shadows, the Prisoner, and Death are all the next. I mean, that's the next book. Those are the next, and they're major characters that stay with him. They become his new quartet, basically. And then in the fourth book, you're introduced to his original quartet, not just Cuthbert, but his other friends. And the scene in the Gunslinger where after he has his trial of manhood, which he's the youngest to ever pass the trial of the gunslinger. No one's ever done it that young. And they fully expected him.
And like last record setter was his dad.
Right.
And he beat that record by like 2 years or
right.
something.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And then that scene where he goes and finds the whore in the town, and then his dad kicks the door in, you know, and then Wizard and Glass basically picks up right where that is.
Mm.
And then you find out who his original where he talks about Susan, the girl at the window. That's all the fourth book.
Okay.
And it's the fourth book by itself is just that whole story is amazing, because again, like you said, it's him going back and telling his backstory basically, and kind of how he discovered he knows nothing about the Dark Tower when he passes his trial of manhood or anything like that. And then it gets pretty amazing.
I think I like the fourth book the most because each book before it kind of has its foot in both realities, right? It has like the stuff with Roland, his Kotzet in Midworld, and also it has like some stuff with characters in our world. And I just love that the fourth book you just dive entirely into Midworld and just there's no reference to our world, and it's just so satisfying to just be fully immersed in that.
Yeah, I agree. The Wizard and Glass is if I had to pick a favorite out of the whole series, it would be that one.
So I want to talk about the last chapter, but before we get to that, Lazy, I'm sure you think we've been a little too charitable. So let's get into like the critical aspects of Gunslinger.
Well, I actually wanted to ask a question for Chancellor Joel, more of because this whole conversation seems like you keep referencing future books. So
sorry.
How significantly would it change your opinion of the Gunslinger if King had not continued the series?
Oh, like how does it work?
Like as its own thing?
Oh, it would.
Yeah.
Most people that I know and that I've tried to recommend to the series, like you almost had to tell them, like, look, just get through the first book, and when you get to the second one, then you'll get it. Like, you know, as excited as I get about the series, it's like if it was just the Gunslinger by itself, it'd be like, yeah, it's a good story. I really like the ending. I think it's pretty epic and pretty deep. But yeah, that's not an unfair criticism at all if it was just by itself.
Okay.
Yeah, because you probably did yourself a big favor because you said you bought like the first two in one go.
Yeah. So as soon as I was done with the first one, I was just bam. I mean, I didn't even stop. I just immediately started reading the Drawing of the Three.
Yeah, I think like I think your premise like would also negate the Dark Tower being like the crux of King's like creative universe. So I imagine it wouldn't mean as much if it was just kind of like this weird dark fantasy offshoot. But yeah,
well, I'm a little more curious because for the rest of the people that read the book, we didn't read the rest of the series. So like to try to talk about this book, is it like you can't really talk about this book without talking about the rest of the series?
Okay, interesting.
Or do you think that it kind of holds up on its own? So
it's hard for me to say.
So it's sort of like
I read this book for the first time when I was like 15 or 16, and like it ticked a ton of fucking boxes for me. Like I was obsessed with Steven Seagal and Arnold Schwarzenegger movies at the time, and it was like this super violent adult book where there's these like fucking demons. It's just like shit that I had never read before, and like to slowly realize throughout it that like Midworld is our world, but but like a future apocalypse version with like the kind of echoes of our culture with Hey Jude and stuff. I just had never read anything like that before. I feel like that's like a dime a dozen today. Like there are a million Fallout last year. Like there's tons of apocalyptic shit, and like Gunslinger just like broke my brain in this totally new way when I was 16. So I mean, I think it does stand by itself. It's not the book that I would want to reread from the series. Is like kind of the least besides six. Six is actually my least favorite book. But there's still moments of it that I love. Like I love the Tull massacre always gives me goosebumps. I do get kind of bored when we go back in the past and talk to Court. But the part where he wins the gunslinger battle, I cried in the car when that was happening. Um, I don't
Yeah.
know. I do think that the end of it is a little bit like college kids. We got high and let's talk about metaphysics. Um, but it doesn't like overstay its welcome, I
Well, I
think.
mean, the thing is, right now it's overdone, but like in the time period, it wouldn't have been though.
Yeah.
Like you said, imagine if you were like Chance, if you were reading that in the 90s, you know?
Yeah, it's got a different connotation based on like the time period and everything.
Yeah, because right now you might have that a lot more. That's because they're copying from stuff like this.
That is an aspect I think is worth taking into account when we do these kind of when we do book club like this, because we're gonna do Homer's Odyssey
Oh, and that's way.
in February, and we're definitely gonna have to talk about like cultural significance and like things outside of just the narrative itself for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, imagine if you had read that at the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure that would have been mind blowing. Read, I mean, we don't even know when Homer's Odyssey was published. It was like from this year to this year. It's like a 200-year gap. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I guess
I'm curious what you guys think like the Dark Tower is a metaphor for.
I think
What
they explain it in the last chapter. Unless I've got a misunderstanding of it, but sorry, I'll let y'all answer first.
I mean, it's kind of like the Tower of Babel in a way.
Oh shit.
Because it's a way for.
Oh fuck.
Or okay, it's like the Tower of Babel, but to the Man in Black and whoever his master is, because they're trying to use it in that way. They want to use it as a way
to get to
God.
Oh my god, dude, you're right. Because that's literally what the Tower of Babel's about, is Nimrod's building a tower to heaven.
Mm-hmm. And they want to use it to get to God.
And then Roland says, because the Man in Black's like, you would try to like get there. And he's like, well, God did. Like God is like, God did it. Damn. That's pretty crazy. I didn't think about that. I kind of thought like it's the crux of it's what like life is not what's significant, it's size. And the Dark Tower encompasses size as like as a concept, like as a thing. So it's like the void, like the overarching, it's the crux. It's the crux of all, I would say.
I mean, to me, it's like when you have a mouse, like an old timey like computer mouse, and it's like a little like scroll thing.
What?
Yeah, where you can scroll in or scroll out. Well, that's what the tower
What are you
does.
talking about?
Yeah, it's like a mouse scroll, like the little thing in the middle where you can either scroll in or scroll out.
How is that like the tower?
Well, because the tower is literally just either zooming in or zooming out. Like it's your perception that like changes everything.
Oh, so like you could say like in the same way that like that's what life is if you're like in this universe.
Yeah, like he was mentioning, oh, we could just be like a little speck of dust inside like a piece of grass.
Oh, right, because he was talking about scope, like scale of things. Yeah.
So
okay, I got you.
So in a way, he kind of their goal is they want to the bad guys at least they want to like zoom out. They think if they can zoom out enough, they can somehow reach like God.
Okay, I see.
I do have a weird like anxiety sometimes about like what if we are just like our world is just like a tiny little mote on like a blade of purple grass and some alien creature just stomps it one day and we have no idea and existence just freaks out.
I think that's almost certainly the case. Like size is like relative to us, but like things probably go in infinitely. There is no like minimum size of things and there's no maximum size to things. I think that's probably true.
But that's what scares the Man in Black. That's the one thing he couldn't answer.
Yeah. He's like, don't make me look.
I mean,
I think for
as far as I'm aware, though, our universe does have a finite size from what we know, that there isn't matter beyond.
People, though. We have a limit to how much we can see or perceive.
So there's
Yeah, I love that the way.
so unless there's like a massive gap and then more matter.
The idea of like the tower encompassing all size
Okay.
and space, and how he talks about like the fish in the pond has no conception of
What's
the
outside,
world
yeah.
above the pond until it's pulled out and it's grasping for air and
Yep.
it's drowning and it doesn't even understand why.
Or like you just mentioned a gap. Think of like they used atoms as an example. Like most of an atom is just empty space. So we might just be like a neutron or something, but beyond the neutron is just a bunch of empty space.
Yeah.
And outside of the empty space is like a shell and so forth.
Yeah.
I think like limits are a pretty like mortal concept. Like I think all things exist, both conceivable and unconceivable, like on some Lovecraftian horror level stuff.
Agreed.
And it's just like time and place, you know.
And like you asked me what hooked me for it, and it was that last chapter that it was like, as a 19-year-old who at that point I'd already seen the UFO before, like the year before that, and you know, as a person, I was very open to that, the unknown, and I wanted to believe, let's say, and I'm reading this whole thing at the end of it, and it just like really, like I'd never had it articulated for me before in a way where it unlocked a key. It was like a key that went into a keyhole in my mind that I didn't even know was there. And it definitely opened a door in my mind that I didn't know was there. And it's never been shut since.
Yeah, King does a lot of occult philosophy without being like an occult philosophy guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
it even says the as above, so below thing. Yeah.
Like it's like it's like he's really studied on like alchemy and occult mysticism, but doesn't use that terminology.
Right.
Like doesn't do like colloquially like woo-woo stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He makes his own names and and he explains everything so eloquently, like those kind of concepts.
Right. But in a way that layman can understand it. Like it's not necessarily dumbed down. It's just, it's put in a way that, you know, millions of people, because there's, you know, he sold millions of books, like can understand it. It's put in such a way. Yeah. Like you love the prose and the way that it was, you know, presented, the ideas are presented.
And I think that's like what's particularly engaging about King for like a schizo like me is I'm like, yeah, that's real. I'm like, that what you're describing is real.
Mm-hmm. The same thing happened to me, and I remember feeling like, am I weird? Am I a weirdo? Or like, does this, because this just makes all the sense to me in the world.
It gives you like a paranoia, like an existential dread.
Mm-hmm.
He does really. It is very cosmic horror, isn't it?
Very.
Which
very.
of you mentioned cosmic horror?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, someone said something about cosmic horror earlier. I can't remember.
It was me.
Yeah.
So okay, David, Liz, Hiatt, what did y'all think of the Gunslinger as a standalone?
At least for me, I've read enough series that I kind of I could tell it was like part of something bigger. So I'm excited to read the rest. So it's kind of hard for me to, I guess I've read enough of those. It's kind of hard for me to separate out. You know, just think of it as, oh, this is a novel, like something, you know, other ones that we've read. So I don't know. I kind of sort of anticipatorily, you know, filled in that there will be more later. I think if this is this is his only book floating around in the world, I might have had a different reaction to it. But yeah.
So just knowing that there's other books makes it hard to like judge it as a standalone.
Mm-hmm.
I got you.
Yeah, or I just kind of, you know, things that might have stood out to me as like, oh, that was not resolved, or that was not looked at, or, you know, where did that come from in something like this. I guess I kind of just, you know, filled it into my mind that, yeah, we'll get to that later, because that's what happens in big series, and I've read enough of them that, you know, I'll like that, and that's fine. So yeah, I guess I went into it with a lot of that, but I thought it was really cool.
It's weird for me to
Feels
think.
like a prologue to
Sorry,
me.
Liz, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say it feels like a prologue to a bigger series to me. It's like watching a trailer for a movie, you know. It doesn't stand on its own, like, but it's got a lot of snippets of, you know, characteristics of that world that are appealing, and you're like, oh, well, you know, yeah, I'm gonna go read the rest of these to find out more. But yeah, it reads like that to me. There's just so many holes in it, and just so many references that you're like, I have no idea what they're talking about right now. That make it clear that there's a lot more to the story.
I remember thinking like the aspects of the desert, and there's like remnants of technology from our world. It seems like that it's like, is this a post-apocalypse? Like, you know, is this like Vampire Hunter D, like thousands of years in the future? And I had just seen Vampire Hunter D for the first time at that point in my life too, and like in 99, 2000. So like there was an aspect of that. And it's weird too to think back then, my 19-year-old self, God, I'm old, that it's like the way that we are now with George R.R. Martin, waiting for the Dance of the Dragons to be done, or the Ice and Fire to be done. Like when I started the series, there were only 4 books, and there was no, you know, the internet wasn't even really a thing. So like there wasn't much of a community that was talking about like, you know, when's it going to be done? You had to kind of dig and find out on your own, and wait for the next books, and are they going to come out, when are they going to come out, you know? And the fact that he did finish the series and it is resolved, like I can remember so clearly, like at the end of the Wizard and Glass, like waiting for years to see how it ended. And that's a really good way to put it, Liz. It is like a trailer for, and really it's like a trailer for all of his works, because it is very much an expanded kind of universe thing.
I like that you brought up George R. R. Martin, because that's something else I noticed reading this. Is it's like King and Martin both are masters of the like gut punch scenes, like these really just like
centerpieces.
Like the massacre at Tull is kind of like this big moment. Same thing with his fight with Cuthbert.
Oh, you mean Court, where he duels Court, his master? Court, his master.
That moment where with David, the Raven,
the whole town attacking him.
The entire town. He goes where Brown asks him, "Did you pass through Tull? How's Tull?" He's like, "It's dead."
Like, I killed everyone.
And he doesn't even like. He has such a deadpan Nate. Like I love his character, because he is so just like PTSD trauma, just like, and he doesn't even know it. I mean, he's a cold killer, like the bombardier eyes, where it talks about his eyes, the blue eyes, and oh my gosh, yeah, dude.
And then like same
and
thing.
He kills Allie, like, you know, and she wants to die at that point. When he kills her,
I've seen too much.
She says, I said the word, I said 19, and now I've seen the other side of death. Like, please just shoot me.
And then like Martin, it's the same thing, like the Red Wedding. Like there's several, like Ned's death. There's all these big moments, like just flashy scenes in Game of Thrones that are like that too.
Like when I was reading Martin and the Ice and Fire, when I read the Red Wedding, and I very specifically remember like read the couple of paragraphs and I was like, wait, did I read that right? Like turned the page back and read it again, like, oh shit, like oh my god. I meant to ask you, and you guys as well, what'd you think about the gun barrel abortion?
Okay, me and Lazy were talking about this. It was unclear to both of us what happened there. So the way I interpreted that is like, this is not a real baby. This is like a demon baby. So this is like an exorcism abortion.
Correct.
It's like a spiritual abortion.
Correct.
But also he literally shoved the barrel of his gun inside of her. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
That's how he killed it.
And did he fire?
No.
Is that a thing?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
But you'll have way more context for it later about his guns specifically. And the guns are mystical in their own right. Like, it's fucked up though.
Something Lazy brought up too is he talks a lot about Roland's genitals in even non-sexual scenes. It's like, this is how his groin was doing in any given moment.
I guess that's true. I guess that's true.
They're talking about scenes where they're saying his like nuts go inside his body, depending on what's going.
So here's Roland with David the Hawk. I don't know if you guys can see that at all.
Because we want to
camera's up there.
Oh, the camera's up there. I'm like trying to. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's this is Marvel Comics released a series, a couple of series that are like little chapters from the
cool.
tower, and yeah, this one specifically is that backstory, and then it's Wizard and Glass. So I can't flip too far because you'll see too much. But like, here's Court coming at him, and then he hurls the hawk at, because I love how it describes how, like, even when he unveils the hawk, he says, "What's your weapon? What's your choice of weapon?" And Roland has the hawk, and it's like Court still doesn't really understand what's about to happen. And then he just, because he tells him at one, he's like, "You can't train a hawk. Like, the hawk isn't loyal to you. The hawk is just following its nature." And or you can't befriend a hawk, is what he says. Yes. And then I love that whole thing. It's so good.
And you know what I literally just realized, and I can't believe I've just now putting this together. He's like David going up against Goliath, but the sling is David.
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch. It's not subtle at all.
So many
there's
layers.
A whole bunch of biblical stuff in the Gunslinger.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Man in Black is like,
yeah,
Lucifer or the snake, or like,
yeah, it's also like very like Blood Meridian a little bit. Like, he reminds me of the Judge.
I was gonna say that exact thing, that there were things in that with the Western setting and like just the wiping out of towns. It reminded me a little bit of that too, which was interesting because I didn't anticipate that for whatever reason. I just knew so little about this going into it.
Yeah.
See, that's so cool to me that you guys didn't really like know much about this specific. Like, we all have an impression of Stephen King from pop culture, as It and the horror writer, but this one is just, it's very different, and like, it's really neat to me that you guys went into it with that.
I went completely clean.
Yeah.
I've never even watched a movie like that was based on any of his works.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, we did
Cool.
watch The Dark Tower the other
night.
But
before reading the book, I never like had any like.
The movie's so bad.
I haven't even watched
it. Was abysmal.
I haven't even watched
really
it.
It's so bad.
But I found the very first part of the book really interesting, and it actually like it completely threw me off because I thought it was going to be a completely different story. Because the most Western part of the whole series is literally just the beginning, the first act.
Right.
In fact, after reading the first act, I thought, oh, it's going to be like one of those Western series where it's a bunch of short stories of like the badass just doing random things, and then there's not really like a bigger like story. I don't know how to
we got some
that.
episodic elements that felt a little fillery to me, so it is kind of like that.
But that was mostly the first part. Like, the whole town sequence is kind of like that, and it's after he picks up Jake where it becomes more of like an actual. Like,
they have some adventures that like I enjoyed, but could have also like did not. I mean, maybe later books will make them more relevant, but like some stuff happened that did feel like the adventures of Roland and Jake to me, like the succubus. Like the slow zombies,
slow mutants.
Mm-hmm.
That's how the book was originally released, was actually as a series of short stories.
Right. It was published in like a sci-fi Weird Tales like magazine.
Interesting,
because that's the way they used to do old westerns.
And that's how iRobot was. Because we just recently did iRobot too.
Yeah, because old westerns, old sci-fi, they would just be big parts of like magazines. So they would only have like enough time for like one story.
Yeah.
Like, even the way it's set up, where it's like instead of doing chapters, like they do have chapters, but they have like
there's like acts.
Yeah.
Like acts.
Yeah.
Like an act would be like its complete like arc or story or.
Yeah,
like,
I'm glad you mentioned that, dude. Yeah, that I'd forgotten to bring that up. That's how this was originally published. Was in like I think it was Weird Tales or something. I mean, some
magazine sci-fi.
Yeah.
Because that's how he would sell his stories. Like, and if you read, he has a book called On Writing that is nonfiction, but it's about like his process and how he, over all these years came to understand how his creative process and stuff. And he talks and describes about like driving around on a motorcycle with a typewriter strapped to the back of his motorcycle from like shitty apartment to shitty apartment. And he would try to sell these stories to these magazines, and that was how he was trying to make his living.
Damn. So he's hustling.
Yeah, he did. I mean, he was dirt poor, dude. Like,
damn.
Which is why this should have never been a movie. It should have been like, if it's like formatted like that, like episodes, it should have been like a show.
Well, they're making it a series. The guy who did Midnight Mass and The Haunting of Mike Flanagan. You know who that is?
We were talking about
He's
this
doing a
before.
series that's
Is that the Amazon one?
yeah, and it's
Joel
happening.
was telling us about this before. Did you say it got canceled?
They had like a pilot. Is that what you mentioned?
That was before the Dark Tower movie. So Amazon had the rights to it back then.
Right.
It passed to the folks who did the movie, and now Flanagan has reacquired.
Okay. So we might still get a Dark Tower series.
Yeah,
That'd be dope.
supposedly it's happening. And then the guys who did Stranger Things are doing The Talisman, which The Talisman and Black House are two books that are tied together, and they're actually really kind of integral to this story as well. But you don't have to read them to get through the tower. Like you can read The Talisman and Black House after the fact, and you'll be
I would
fine.
say if you like finish the series and you want more of that flavor, where
There you
there's
go.
like horror and fantasy, and like those two books are a really good follow up.
Yeah. So I've read both of those as well.
I've read his entire.
Ah, cool.
That was my my COVID project, which was like
We're friends then for sure.
Yeah,
That's
when
awesome.
when I heard we were doing this, I was like, oh, we got to have Joel for this.
That's awesome.
He's a big Stephen King head.
I would also mention books that are integral to the Dark Tower mythos are Insomnia,
Yep.
which is like not really that fun of a read, but
God, dude, no. That's a slog, like an absolute slog until the end.
it like very directly references.
Yeah.
And then
I gotta get going, guys. Good talk though.
Yeah. Have a good night. Thanks
Later,
for
lazy.
coming.
Yeah, we got to get going too.
Thanks for coming, guys. Appreciate you. Hey, you got any shows coming up you want to plug real quick?
Yeah, so we're doing the first Friday in January.
cool.
Oh, you are cool. Me too.
Yeah, with Catch Fire.
Hell
Sweet.
yeah. That's what's up.
Yeah, so yeah, that's the third. So yeah,
Where are you guys playing?
that's at the Underdog.
Sweet, dude. I didn't know you guys were playing on that show.
Yeah.
Loney has such a bad tendency to not tell me what's going on.
Yeah, but then everybody shows up to the show and it's a surprise. It's
Well,
great.
yeah, dude, that's
Hey.
awesome. That's exciting. I didn't know you
Yeah.
guys were playing.
But
Awesome.
that'll be
Sweet.
fun. Yeah, I look forward to doing that with y'all too. So yeah, that's our next one coming up.
I'll be there. I'll see you on the 3rd. Check out Cassette Stress. I got a new EP out.
Invite me to that.
Which is great, by the way.
Thanks so
Yeah, I
much.
love it, you guys.
I'm gonna hit several of y'all up as I'm going through the series and find out what I need to read and what I need to do.
Yeah, totally. And if you want to borrow any of the illustrated versions or the graphic novels, I would be happy to loan them to you.
Appreciate it. Many thanks. Hell yeah, thank you. So yeah, cool. We'll appreciate this and we'll talk with y'all later.
If I don't
Sweet.
see you before then, Happy New Year's.
Yeah, same
Same to
to
you.
all y'all.
Yeah.
See you guys. See you in
Bye,
the new
guys.
year.
2025. Jeez, dude.
Yeah, we'll kind of wrap it up here in a minute, but I want to talk about the last chapter where we finally get him talking to the Man in Black.
Mm-hmm.
And Joel mentioned it earlier, it's true, like there's a very like it feels like King had his like mescaline LSD like stoner philosophy phase in this.
Yeah.
Because the last chapter is just like bruh.
Yeah, exactly. Like, dude, what if there was like a tower
Yeah.
at the middle? But it goes back to that poem, which the poem Child Roll into the Dark Tower Came is very like dry and just like, oh my, like it's not easy to get through. And maybe it's because I'm not a literary person at all, but like epic poems for me are kind of like not easy to make it through,
As a poet, I don't like poetry.
yeah.
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 I think a lot of poetry is really dry and boring.
Yeah.
And I don't get it.
But it's there, and you're right, there's so much like not even half-baked occult philosophy in that last chapter. It's like as a 20 some odd year old, for him to be tapping into that is just,
And and I'm not complaining because that's my shit.
yeah.
I eat that shit up. I love all of the stoner philosophy stuff.
Absolutely.
And in fact, I highlighted here, page 234 in the last chapter.
Mhm.
The universe was void. Nothing moved. Nothing was. The gunslinger drifted, bemused. Let's have a little light, the voice of the Man in Black said nonchalantly, and there was light. The gunslinger thought in a detached way that light was pretty good,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is Genesis 1:1.
Right.
Like God made light, separated light from darkness, and saw that it was good. Is how, and then he goes on to separate sea from land and create light. So it's Genesis.
Yeah.
Genesis 1:1.
Yeah.
And it's so funny that you bring up the Tower of Babel, because you're absolutely right. Like there's so much biblical iconography. It's like not subtle at all. Like it's everywhere.
The part I found funny was when he's showing him how the world and everything was created, he's like, oh shit, the people that said it was round or curved were right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Like in Roland's philosophy or conception of the world and his entire life growing up, like they didn't know the world was round.
Yeah, like he heard stuff
Gilead.
about it. He just was like, there's no way to
right. And he zooms out and it's like, oh wow, they were right. It is round, you know. And then I love it how he, like the man in black saying to him, I'm gonna keep showing you this. We're gonna keep getting bigger and bigger. Just cry off. Say you'll renounce the tower. Say you'll quit, and I'll stop bombarding your mind. It's like being on the most intense acid trip ever, and you're just like, dude, when is this gonna end? And it's like, well, it'll end if you say you're done, but if you're not done, then let there be light. And he just fucking nukes his brain.
And on that, I'd like to read this passage again, page 236. Consciousness had no chance of survival in that great glare, but before it perished, the gunslinger saw something clearly, something he believed to be of cosmic importance. He clutched it with agonizing effort and then went deep, seeking refuge in himself before that light should blind his eyes and blast his sanity. He fled the light and the knowledge the light implied, and so came back to himself. Even so do the rest of us, even so the best of us. And what's that? That's like nirvana, right?
So
like
good.
Like if you're in heaven, there can only be light. That's the only thing that makes sense. If you're trying to actually like rationalize like a perfect world, it's one entity that is pure light, and all things are this thing. So in the presence of the light, your ego completely dissipates. You cease to exist, and that's the state that the Buddhas reach. That's nirvana. So he's deep in the like several different like religious principles that all kind of link together.
Right.
It's just his way of saying the thing that's been said a multitude of times in different ways.
In many different ways over thousands of years in humanity. And yeah, you're so right. You got exactly what I knew you would get out of it, you know, like when I kept telling, I mean, the first
I'm
time
very
we
glad
ever
you
met,
recommended this to me. Yeah.
like the first time we really connected, we were taught, you and I were talking about The Shining, not the book, but
the concept of
The Shining.
That psychic connection.
The Shining is a real thing. It's just like you're saying, this book jumped out at you when you were 19. I mean, The Shining is a real thing. We're all a little telepathic.
Yeah.
Everyone can read each other's minds. It's like, that's why like in a relationship, the most important thing is honesty, because especially like if you're in like a relationship with someone for a long time and you're around each other all the time, like you only pretend that you can keep secrets from each other.
Right.
But you both kind of know when the other one's lying.
Yeah.
It's like people are very, very intuitive on like a psychic level. And this is true of like places and objects too, like a piece of art, you know,
right.
A book. Yeah.
Dude, I love it. You really like, you got out of it exactly what I hoped you would get out of it. Yeah. So, and the vision that he sends him at the end, and he even tells him at one point right there, he's like, you couldn't have handled that, or what does he say? He's like, I couldn't have given that vision to so and so. Like he wouldn't have,
his own father. He would be drooling.
Yeah, he wouldn't have been able to handle it.
He would have came back like with madness.
And also he tells him that he's like, I'm not even the person that you're chasing. You think that you're chasing me, but you're not. I'm the furthest minion. I'm the least of the entities that you should be focused on, you know.
I kind of interpret too the way he's like making sacrifices along the way, that's like getting through a checkpoint. So it's like I think he's already in the tower, because the tower is everything. Everything is contained within the tower, it seems. And so it kind of feels like he is already like, it's like a whirlpool. Like he's getting deeper and deeper down this vortex. And so like right now he's here, but he's going to get further and further down, and you're going to lose more and more humanity the further down you get, which is what singularity and enlightenment are. And the line there between madness and sanity is just your ability to explain things to other people. So it's like, that's really sanity is like a societal thing. Like if you're mad in a vacuum, there's no difference between being sane in a vacuum.
Right. You wouldn't know.
It's your ability to like explain things to other people.
Right. Man,
I always kind of interpreted Roland's like he's a Dark Tower junkie
yeah.
as kind of a metaphor for like kind of the insanity of the creative pursuit, which I think it is like really preoccupies Stephen King, like the fact that Jack Torrance, breaks Danny's arm, and but he's an author. Like I feel like Roland is chasing the tower in the same way that King and other like really prolific creatives are chasing like the creative pursuit of making perfect art at like the detriment to their relationships, you know.
Yeah. Dude,
Yeah.
I think you're totally right about that. And I mean, I think for like as at the age that I found this was kind of the same age that I found not music, because I loved listening to music, but I didn't start playing guitar until I was like 17 years old. And 17, 18, 19 years old for me was like the point where I realized like, I don't know, maybe I could do this. Like this is I didn't have anything as a person that was like my identity. Like I'm a musician. Like people would ask me like, well, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, well, I'm a lifeguard, or I go to school or whatever. Like I didn't have anything that was that for me until right about this time in my life. And then yeah, I think you're totally right. It's that pursuit of the creative process that he's very preoccupied with, and that is his tower. And then he figured out a way to tap into that, like as a metaphor for himself, but then also just like kind of how Tolkien said, like it's the story's applicable to everyone who reads it in a different way. Like we all get a different sort of metaphor out of it, but because it is broad enough, it's not a one-to-one allegory. You know what I mean? Like the tower isn't just this one thing. It's something that means something different to each of us.
The ending on purpose or obsession. Yeah.
Right. The passage that I loved is where he sends him the vision, and then the page numbers are going to be different, but it's right after what you read me. So it's right after there's chapter 3, chapter 4, and then chapter 5 in the vision. And he says, what did you see? And Roland says, I don't know. And then like Walter asks him, the man in black asks him, what was at the end of the vision? And the gunslinger, it's kind of like, I'm not really sure. And then Gunslinger realizes that Walter doesn't even know what was at the end of the vision. He says, you don't know, oh great sorcerer who brings the dead to life. You don't know.
That's the thing I mentioned to you.
And then the man in black says, I know, but I don't know what. And then he said, the gunslinger says, white light, and then a blade of grass, one single blade of grass that filled everything. And I was tiny, infinitesimal. And then the man in black says, a blade of grass. Are you sure? Yes. And it was purple. And then the next thing starts where he says, hear me, Roland, son of Stephen. The universe is the great all and offers a paradox too great for the finite mind to grasp. As the living brain cannot conceive of a non-living brain, although it may think it can, the finite mind cannot grasp the infinite. This whole thing at the end, where the fact of the universe existence defeats both the pragmatist and the romantic. There was a time, 100 generations before the world moved on, when mankind had achieved enough technical and scientific prowess to chip a few splinters away from the great stone pillar of reality. Even so, the false light of science shone only in a few developed countries. Like it just, dude, it's so great. And then, of course, again, he tries to kill the man in black multiple times. And he's like, yeah, you can't do that. Like, it
wasn't in the cards.
Yeah, exactly. And dude, it gets insanely amazing from there too.
Hell yeah.
Okay, I have a question for you guys, because I think I might have been spoiled about something in the movie we watched. Have you guys watched the movie?
Yeah.
So there's a point where they're I think the abandoned house. Remember the abandoned house?
Yeah.
And spray painted on a wall.
Yeah.
Okay, so he mentions, like you said earlier, there are other entities even stronger than him.
Correct.
I remember one specific name, Crimson King.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a thing.
That's a thing.
I don't even like, I brought the books and then I'm like, crap, they can't look at any of the pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and you mentioned Insomnia. Like Insomnia ties into that part of it specifically, but yeah, the king is a massive part of the story going forward. Yes.
Okay.
And the movie, they put really parts of all of the books into that one movie, which is one of the reasons it's so fucking bad.
Can't do that.
No, because that stuff in the house happens in the third book. So yeah, it's terrible. And even I love Matthew McConaughey, but he was a terrible Man in Black. Like,
We kept joking that they were just following him around. He wasn't acting. That's just what
they just followed McConaughey around. And they're like, "Hey man, just be McConaughey." He's like,
"All right, I got to capture children."
Yeah, I'm
Stop
gonna
breathing.
Stop. Yeah.
Just God. And the thing is like when they announced that movie was gonna be made and all, and of course it was Sony that made that movie, who fucks up everything, like Spider-Man, everything. But when they said that Idris Elba was going to play Roland, I didn't really have a problem with that. Like that's not he's obviously not described as being black in the books at all. But that aspect of it was like, okay, whatever, like, sure. And the one thing in that whole movie that I do actually like, and I thought was really cool, was when they show him reloading the guns, and how it describes how his fingers do their reloading trick, and he just like that's something in the book.
He just flicks them in.
Yeah, that was neat.
That kind of like, I've been thinking about getting a gun for a while, and that kind of like really convinced me to get a revolver, because it just seemed more trustworthy.
Yeah, well, they're more reliable in the sense that
it's not gonna jam.
It wouldn't jam, and and the guns become a very big deal later on. Like I said, the thing, like you said, about it being an exorcism, that's a whole thing. Like, I mean, the origin of the guns is really interesting. Like when it gets to that stuff, you're going to be like, oh, whoa, man. So not in like a McConaughey, like, whoa, man, it's very much like that. So this tattoo, I don't know if Alice can see this, but this tattoo is from the tower, and then my rose is also direct. The reason I got the rose is specifically related to the vision. Also, the blade of grass is yeah, it's a thing, dude. Like it changed my life. It really did.
I'm excited to read more. I'll definitely read more of this series for sure. Any closing remarks before we get out of here?
I just do want to mention one other thing. One additional reading for the series is in the short story collection Everything's Eventual.
Ah, yes.
A little novella called Little Sisters of Illyria. Fun little bonus vampire tale that's set in Midworld, has Roland as the main character.
Yeah, this is the graphic novel version of that story, and it's phenomenal.
Okay, cool. So there's extended reading beyond the main Dark Tower books.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
I'm glad you brought that up too, because have you seen these graphic novels before, the Marvel ones?
Yeah, I've read them all. They're great.
Of course, yeah, they're so good. The artwork's amazing. They're really well done.
You guys have anything else you want to say about Dark Tower?
My last thing is I like the concept of the original strand. That's pretty cool when it comes to mutants.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm assuming that means like original DNA or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. And
because most animals at that point are like mutated to hell, like
right. And he talks about how like when Allie goes to make him the burgers, and she's like, oh, it's threaded stock, and he's like, yeah, right, it probably came from something with 3 eyes and 4 tails or whatever. Yeah.
What about you, Chance? Anything else you want to say about Gunslinger?
The Gunslinger is probably one of my favorite, like if I had to list my favorite literary characters, and especially the evolution of him as a character, like he has such an arc from the beginning of the story to the end. and I mean, you were in a way kind of describing and not even realizing it, a progression of the story, the spiral nature of the story. Also, he definitely changes as a character, and also the thing not about him, but the book, The Gunslinger, is the reason that Hey Jude is my favorite Beatles song.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for recommending it. That was I'm definitely I'm hooked. I'll definitely read the rest of this series.
Thanks for letting me recommend it.
Yeah, Joel, thanks for being here, man. Anything you want to plug? Any Morbid Orchid shows?
Yeah, I think we are playing our next show uh January 25th in Chattanooga, and I think January 30th at Springwater. So yeah, just look out for us in January. All of our shows are at morbidorchid.com/live.
Hell yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, we'll have to meet soon, you and I.
Sure, man. Yeah, we're Kotzet now.
Absolutely.
Y'all know Taylor. He's in a band with Joel.
Right. Yeah. And I've still only I've seen you guys play like last year one time, and it was like before I even knew Taylor, so I didn't even talk to any of y'all or interact. So now we'll definitely have to hang out and have some conversations.
And you can catch Chancellor Ruster with
Indeed.
Catch Fire January 3rd, first Friday at the Underdog. Any other shows coming up?
We do have shows coming up, but Travis has the booking list. So
TBA.
January
The
3rd.
one is the 3rd.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll
exactly.
definitely be there.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good time.
And
thank you, Alice. Thank you for having.
And I want to can I get a drum roll? So next month we have The Haunting at Hill House by what is it? Shirley Jackson. This will be the second Shirley Jackson book we've read on book club. Last time we read We Have Always Lived in the Castle. Our friend Jonah recommended this. Definitely looking forward to getting into that. And with that being said, we will see you next week, Alice.
You know what's really weird about the fact that's the book that you picked is the guy who did that series for Netflix is the guy who's doing The Dark Tower.
Okay, yeah, you said that earlier, and I was like, oh shit, that's funny that's working out that way.
Yep. Again, the 19, man, like this
synchronicity.
Yes, it's all part of the whole, man.
Well, I'm glad that The Dark Tower brought us all together today, in a metaphysical sense and also a literary sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Alice, we'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Yeah.